Hello and welcome to my video demonstration of the DHCP lab. In this lab we're going to configure DHCP on a Soho type firewall / router, and then we're going to observe that our three host devices can indeed get their IP addresses from DHCP server. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project, and I'll name this DHCP. And let's start bringing some devices over. So we're going to start with this pfSense Soho firewall type device, and then I will add a web terminal to it, and then I need to add a switch. I'm going to use this switch right here, the Ethernet switch, and then I'll go ahead and add some host devices. One, client 2, and I'll add my third client device. So now let's go ahead and get some more cabling done, and I'll go to my cabling tool and I'll connect Ethernet 0 to port 1, Ethernet 0 Alpine Linux 2 goes to port 2, and then this third one I'll connect to port 3. And actually I did forget, normally when I do this, as soon as I bring my devices onto my workbench, I go ahead and start them so they can boot up while I'm doing my connections. And then I'll go ahead and turn on my interface labels as well. Now let's go and add Ethernet 0 is going to go to the firewall on EM1, and then we need to connect Ethernet 4 to the web terminal. Now I can turn off my tool, my connection tool, and just click and drag these around a little bit and move some of my labels so this is a little bit more visible for me. Okay, so now that I've got my devices on here, I'm going to use the notes tool to put some IP addresses on. 10/24. So helpful to have my IP addresses right on my diagram. It gets confusing when you look at some type of lab document and you're going back and forth. Okay, so now I've got my network built, I've got all of my labels, I know exactly what these IP addresses are, and now what I need to do is I need to open up a console connection into my web terminal, and I will log into this firewall here. I don't know why I opened that one too, but here we go. So now I need to type this address 192.168.1.1. Oops, I can't do that yet. I need to put an IP address on my web terminal client. So I'm going to go into the terminal and Control-Shift. And I'll do IP address add 192.168.1.10/24 device. And I always like to do ifconfig after I put an address on anything. And I do this with Windows too. If I do it in a Windows mode, I go into the command line and type ipconfig just to make sure that everything looks right. Saves a lot of trouble down the road if you verify while you're doing stuff. So now let me put the address in my firewall. Let me log into my firewall. So 192.168.1.1. And I'll go ahead and click advanced, and I will accept this risk and continue. Now let's log in. And sure, I can save it. Okay. So now I've got my firewall going. Let me go into my services tab, and I will configure DHCP server. And the first thing I want to do is I want to enable DHCP server on my LAN interface. Turn on that service. Now I'm going to specify the range of addresses that are available to be used by my DHCP server. And these are addresses. I'm starting at 25, and in the real world maybe you'd start at 10, but we do need to leave some addresses available for static IPs. Other network devices, the switch could have an address. If I had printers or cameras or anything that we wanted a static address on, we could use the space from 1.2. 1.1 is the firewall here. We could use 1.2 to 1.24 for devices requiring a static IP. Next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and tell this DHCP server what DNS servers to give the clients. The clients, yeah, they get an IP address, but if they don't know what the DNS server is, they're kind of stuck. So let's put in a couple of addresses for DNS servers. I'll use Google's public DNS server addresses for this. So now we're going to tell the clients these are the DNS servers you should be using. And then the last thing we need to, well, one of the last things we need to do is we need to tell it what its default gateway is. So these devices are going to get an address, but if they don't know that this is the address of the router right here, then they're going to be stuck. So let's put that address in, 192.168.1.1. And then we can also tell it this is the domain you're on. So when the devices log in for the first time, they're able to find the domain controller and log into a domain controller. It helps them get logged into a enterprise type network. So now that we've got everything in, I'm going to go ahead and save, and then we can go in and verify that it's working. So I'll leave that open, but let's open up our console to, actually let's just open up the consoles individually. I've got my 3 consoles open, and it's down here. Alpine 3 didn't open, so let's open that one too. There we go. Okay, now these terminals, they are not running DHCP by default, so I have to turn that on. So the command for that is udhcpc. And it did indeed send a discover message out there, and it found it. And I can actually take a look at that too. Let me right click on this and I'll start a packet capture. So we can kind of watch this in action, hopefully. So I'm going to bring this up here, and I'm going to actually apply a filter for DHCP. Now we're not seeing any DHCP traffic now, but when I go and configure this one, let me get my console window open again. I don't need that second terminal. I already had one. So here's my terminal. Let's bring that over here. And then let's bring Wireshark. I've got a lot of Wiresharks open. Let me close some of those. Can't find the Wireshark. I think this is the one I wanted. Yeah, that's the one. Anyway, so I've got Wireshark open on one side, and I've got the filter. So now when I do udhcpc, I should see udhcpc, DHCP. I did DCHP the first time. Okay. So now I've stuck it, and we can actually see these messages. I got a discover coming from a source with no IP address being sent to a broadcast address. And then we got a message back from the firewall 1.1 going out, and it actually put this address in there. That's the address it's offering it. And then the client device sent the request, and then we got the acknowledgement back from the firewall to the client device. So there's the discover, offer, request, and acknowledgement all in sequence going across that line. So we can close that now. So I got it on Alpine Linux 2. Let's take a look at Alpine Linux 3, udhcpc, and it should have an address also. So now let's just check a couple other things. So we got an IP address, and on one machine I can type ifconfig, and I did indeed get an IPv4 address. That's great. So now some of the next steps we want to do is let's make sure that we got that default route in there. So let's see what we want to do there. So we can use the command route to print our routing table. Give that a second to go through. Okay, and we did indeed get that default route. So our client device knows if it needs to send packets to a network it doesn't know about, that's the address of the router that can take care of that for you. And then the last thing we want to do is the way we look at the domain name and the DNS server is that information is written to a file called resolve.conf. So let's read that using the cat command, cat. And the resolve.conf file is located in the etc directory. And we should see that information. Resolve.conf does not have an E. And we did indeed learn that this is the domain we're going to use when we connect. And these are two DNS servers that we can use if we need to query like a website or anything like that. That's how we find out host name to IP address resolution. So anyway, this concludes the walkthrough of the DHCP lab. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.